is my law partner, this is my associate lawyer at our office. That's it.
So all total, all three of you total.
Right. We've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on this case, and we've done the best job we can. We've presented every fact that we could find in this case, and that's for $5,400. Okay?
What are your thoughts on the vote? 3 guilty, 9 not?
I just think that I don't fault the jury for doing anything, and so I was always okay in this case with whatever the jury did. Our job was to put all the facts out there so that the city can see it, so that the jury could see it, and so the police department could see it. And now there needs to be some discussions and coming together about where we want to draw the line on when police officers can use deadly force.
What about the allegations of prosecutorial misconduct?
I thought they were BS, quite frankly. So, I don't think there were any allegations. I bet we didn't commit prosecutorial misconduct, and there was no reason for us to do it. I know all along that's sort of Mr. Bregman's thing, that if somebody's prosecuting a cop, they must be anti-cop. I started my career putting a guy on death row for killing a cop. So I don't have an agenda against police officers. In fact, you saw some of the finest police officers on the force testify in this case. Sergeant Jim Fox, SWAT sergeant, wonderful, wonderful police officers. So we don't have an agenda. There was no out to get the cops from our side. That just wasn't what we were about.
At one point, you apologized to Dominic Perez.
When was that?
At one point in the trial.
What I said to him was I was sorry that he was the one that got sent up there. I think he did not create this situation that happened up there and got sent up and walked into it. And so when he was on the stand, when I was cross-examining him, I told him I was very sorry that he was the one that had gotten sent into this situation. And I still feel that way.
The fact that they couldn't come to a decision, do you think this sends any kind of message about the case to the community? There was a lot of talk about APD, the circumstances. Obviously, there were a lot of things.
I don't think it's a message. I think it is an ongoing discussion that all of us have to have. Police officers have a very difficult job. I think the discussion we need to have as a community is, do we want Dirty Harry or do we want a peace officer? That's kind of where we are. I think we are beyond the Dirty Harry days, and let's hope that we're moving closer and closer to having peace officers like Jim Fox, Sergeant Jim Fox, who said, I don't see SWAT as an attack team. I see it as a team to keep the peace and try to resolve things peaceably. And that's the discussion we need to have here in Albuquerque, is which kind of policing do we want? And I think the jury probably had that same kind of discussion in the jury room as well.
Randy, this case felt, for those of us observing it, myself included, really different, unusual, and difficult to proceed on because of the nature of it, because a lot of your early witnesses were people who worked on the police department with the defendants. Can you talk about that a little bit? How different was this, what we just saw?
Well, I can talk about suggestions for the process in the future, that if there is another police shooting that gets reviewed, having been through the process now, the first one ever in 50 years, I have some suggestions. The first one would be that police departments probably shouldn't investigate their own officers. It's why we had to go outside of the police department to get the evidence we needed even to prosecute the case. I think this format of doing it all in public, not going to a secret grand jury, but making it accessible to the entire community is really important. I think transparency in these cases, I think they shouldn't be done by grand juries. I think they should all be done by preliminary hearing so that the community and the police department itself sees what things might be problematic and what things aren't going to be problematic. So those are my two suggestions going forward. If anybody does another one of these cases, transparency and having somebody else other than the police department investigate it. I think it's also very difficult for local prosecutors to prosecute the police department that they rely on for their to make all their cases for them, all their criminal cases. So
you told jurors that the video speaks for itself. What do you think the video says outside the context of whether someone is right?
I think that video says different things to different people depending on their perspectives. I mean, go online and look at the comments about the video and you see a whole, you see again, polarization among our community about about what they see on the video. And so that's why I think a hung jury is not a surprise in this case. I wouldn't expect anything different in the jury room than we have in our community.
Randy, there was a police officer who testified who said he could have legally shot him, but he didn't, the open space
Right.
officer. Do you think that this may send a signal that other officers around the country have said they are afraid to fire their weapons because they don't want to be in the public spotlight like this?
I guess I don't know. I don't understand what you're asking.
Is this maybe? Do you think this might send a message to other officers? We've lost 5 officers in the state last year.
Well, I understand that, but that's again the discussion the community has to have. Do you want officers to hesitate and preserve citizen life, or shoot do an anticipatory shooting where their spidey senses are tingling and they shoot you and it turns out you have a cell phone? I mean, that's what this kind of case. That's a discussion this kind of case hopefully will engender in our community. And having seen it all, people now can raise those issues and decide how they want policing to go in the future. Okay.
Mr. Burton?
You want to come up? Okay. You guys have any more questions? Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Prosecutor Randy McGinn right there. We're going to bring in our KOB legal expert, Ahmad Assad. We had mentioned she didn't seem very crushed after this. A lot of times you put your blood, sweat, and tears into a 3-week case and you feel like all is lost, but she actually had some hope.
That's a very pointed. I believe that Randy is seasoned enough to understand.
You know what? Hate to interrupt you, but Champ Bregman is talking right now. Let's go to him.
Sends a pretty positive message about how we believe all along this case is pretty weak. These are 2 good police officers, and 99% of the Albuquerque Police Department are absolutely fine police officers that every day we ought to wake up and we ought to thank them for the job they do for our community. This was, I think, a misguided prosecution, and a jury basically just came back at a vote of 9-3 and agreed with us. I hope sincerely, and I appreciate the fact that we have a new district attorney coming in, I hope sincerely that they look at this case, they look at the financial resources that have been spent, and they look at the weak jury support that the state had for its case and decide not to prosecute this and let these 2 good men get on with their lives. This was a case that never should have been prosecuted to begin with, but it's been prosecuted. The result is 9-3 at this point. And these two fine police officers hope to get on with their lives. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sam, how much is this cost them? They're paying their legal expenses out of their own.
Well, listen, I want to say one thing. I mean, we were fortunate enough to have that some of the lawyers that worked on this case are some of the best lawyers that I've ever had the pleasure of being associated with, including my law partner, Eric Loman and Monica Garcia, and Louis Robles and Nick Audio and David Roman. Those are fantastic lawyers, and I can assure you that none of us were in this for any kind of compensation. I don't think police officers would be able to afford the kind of legal fees that I'm sure have built up to this point. With that said, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I know that it was an honor. It was an honor to represent Keith Sandy. He's one of the finest individuals I know. And if we have to do this over again, I won't charge him a penny to do this over again. He's a good man.
Is he bankrupt, Sam?
I'm not going to get into Keith's personal financial situation, but you can only imagine the strain that this has put both on Mr. Sandy and Mr. Perez when it comes to financial. They're going to go on. They're good. They're good people with wonderful families, and they're going to, pick themselves back up. I hope to God, though, that the government recognizes the weakness of this case and doesn't cost the kind of taxpayer dollars it would be to re-prosecute this again, because they're going to get the same result, if not worse, for the government.
Has your client said what he wants to do next? I mean, is he somehow going to try to get back into law enforcement? Should this, cloud lift?
I don't know that he has a strong desire to do that at that point, but that's a decision that he could make down the road, I think. I think this is a little too raw right now to be thinking about law enforcement occupation right now, but I can tell you this, he served his community for 19 years being a police officer, and this entire community owes a debt of gratitude to him for that.
Did he say anything to you, Sam, when the jury made their announcement?
Nothing I'm going to share with you all. But he's obviously he wanted to be able to have a complete, like we all do at times, and a complete win, if you will, 100% walk out of here not guilty decision by the jury. That didn't happen, but 9-3 is pretty darn close. And I think it sends a very powerful message to the government about the strength of their case. And I hope they think about that before their decision on whether or not to try this again.
Sam, you said in your closing argument that we cannot send the police out to do a job and then prosecute them when they in fact do that job. Can you expand on that a little bit? And do you think that things need to change in terms of what we ask the police to do in this community?
Well, we spend an enormous amount of resources training police officers in this state, as we should, to do the right thing under not only just the right thing in general, but also under the laws and the Constitution and the guidance that the courts in this state and in this country have given them when it comes to what they're supposed to do out there when using force. With that said, it's clear to me from all of the evidence that was shared in that courtroom, as much as everything I know about this case, that these officers followed their training to a T. They did exactly what they were trained to do. And the idea that the government trains them to do this, and then the same government prosecutes them when they do it, was the point I was making as being completely ludicrous and is not right. I'm not going to say by any means that every single police officer shooting is going to be justified in the future. But what I am going to say is when cops follow their training, they shouldn't be prosecuted for it.
I'm going to ask you some of the same questions that I asked Randy again. What about the prosecutorial misconduct?
The motion speaks for itself, and any further filings will speak for themselves as well.
And then what about the message? Do you think that this sends a message? There was the open space officer who said he could have shot him. He didn't because he was afraid of being in the media spotlight of what it would do to his family and what it would do to his career.
This is a really tough time in this country and in this city to be a police officer. I think we all have to remember what the job they do is and how tough it is, and how the media has, rightfully in some cases and not in others, focused like a laser beam on what's going on when it comes to police conduct. However, we have to be very careful when we're second-guessing their split-second decisions that are based on training. And so no police officer wants to be the subject of this. I can assure you that.
Should the training include anticipatory shootings? Do we need to look at the training? You say these...
Well, that is a discussion for those who even know more about police tactics far more than I do. And if people in the community don't like the way their government is training police officers, then of course they can do that. But don't go after the police officers for following their training. And don't criminalize conduct that is the exact opposite of that, when it's protecting fellow police officers, when it's their sworn duty to protect the fellow police officers.
You said something to keep. Can you share us what you said? Share with us what you said to him? You whispered something.
I love you, buddy. So we can follow up later on this, but if there's any other questions, I'll take them now. Otherwise, I'm getting out of here. So.
I don't know if Mr. Robles is going to speak.
I don't know either. I lost Mr. Robles in the courtroom. I think you should contact him.
I just wanted to know, do you know if his client intends to try to get his job back?
Oh, I can't speak for them. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That was Sam Bregman.